Mike, thanks for joining me in the studio today.
Thanks for having me, Danny.
So I want to learn more all about Affinity and how you're powered by Snowflake.
We believe our primary data asset is pretty unique. So it comes from a 10-year, 15-year history working with financial institutions. We've provided reward programs for financial institutions. We're considered a banking services provider in those relationships. And by virtue of those operations, we receive a daily feed of debit and credit card transaction data to power these reward programs. Over the course of our history, we've figured out a way to take that data, anonymize it, and create data products out of it. And Snowflake is, at this point in time, our preferred delivery paradigm for those data products.
That's fantastic. So tell me more about, a platform like that, getting credit card data, transaction data, that's a lot of data coming in. So tell me more about kind of how Snowflake fits into that solution.
Sure, you're right, it's an enormous amount of data, and the capacity that Snowflake provides on demand is of course key to our product delivery. Also the separation of compute from storage and the ability to essentially bill our partners, or rather to have Snowflake bill our partners for the compute, simplifies the delivery. We can have a partner who's querying the data, accessing the data, helping us deliver products to various market verticals, and not have to take on that compute expense ourselves.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially with the model that Snowflake provides. You talked about the separation of compute and storage, that's important. Mm-hmm. But also the fact that once the data is essentially shared with your customer, the person that's accessing, or the mm-hmm. company that's accessing that data, they're going to be joining things and kind of joining it with their own data. It's in their Snowflake account, so they can do a lot with that.
It's right in their account. So again, the ability to give access, open, flexible access to this asset that we've developed while still maintaining the compliance requirements, keeping privacy paramount, and not giving actual access to the data itself, but giving access only to the data products. That's really where Snowflake shines, at least from our perspective, and that's why we've chosen it as a delivery.
Beautiful. So let's see more kind of at a high level architectural overview of how Snowflake fits into how the data flows throughout your product.
Sure, happy to do that. The right side of this diagram is entirely Snowflake. The left side of this diagram is this foundational business that we've built, our banking services, right? We receive card data, and you can see that in yellow. There's proprietary elements. All this is cranked through an anonymized data pipeline, and then it's staged on Snowflake for delivery of data products. Those data products are delivered in a privacy compliant yet highly flexible manner using a Snowflake native app to our clients who are, off to the right on this diagram. You can't see them, but they're accessing this truth data set, we call it, enriched, anonymized, connected, and relatively unique in the marketplace given its scope, given its depth, and given the speed at which we can refresh it, which is every day.
I love the simplicity of this architecture that you've built and how Snowflake is really playing a critical role in it. So tell me more about, I see in here you're using Snowflake native applications as the delivery mechanism mm-hmm. for this. Tell me more about why Snowflake in this manner?
As we developed sort of the data products side of the business over the last, 6-7 years or so, we were challenged to deliver sort of the last mile in product delivery because there are so many different use cases. You've got marketing use cases, you've got civic planning use cases, you have media measurement use cases. There are so many different companies, brands out there that can take advantage of the insights from this data that we needed to find a way to make the data available to market partners without giving them the data. And that, as soon as you say that is Snowflake. That's what Snowflake is all about, is providing access to the data without handing over possession of the data, or sharing without sharing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So let's see a demo.
Sure. I'm gonna dive right in here to the demo. What you're looking at here is the marketplace. I've done a search for credit card transaction data, and as you can see among the results here, you have Affinity's Consumer Purchase Insights Syndicated on the right, Consumer Purchase Insights Custom on the left. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Syndicated, and that takes you to a screen where you can read about the native app, you can see a little more about Affinity, and then you can click this Request button on the right here. You click this, you fill out a form, and then what happens is Affinity comes back with sharing, what's called a private marketplace sharing, and that shows up in your Snowflake account as this, recently shared with you. I can then click this button to get the app. It takes a few minutes to install it. A script is run, all the permissions are created, and then I have access to the app itself, and I've got one version of it already installed down here, so we'll go ahead and click on that. This is a Streamlit app, which allows me to run a query. I'll go to this Run Templates section over here. The app is launching, and when I come into the app, it's going to give me access to the, essentially billions of credit and debit card transactions that are that unique asset that I talked about. And so I'm going to look for, let's say, a consumer spend trend. I'm going to ask it to show me the brand name. I'm also going to ask it to group by, let's say, age, because that's a lot of thing that certain brands are interested in. What is the typical age range of my different customers? I'm going to group by week to get a trend line over the course of several weeks. And then I'm going to paste in here a where clause. And this speaks to the level of flexibility that we're trying to give our clients. So as long as the compliance rules are enforced, as long as the partner is only seeing what we allow them to see, we can open it up as much as possible and let them query for, let's say, the segments they're looking for, the particular time ranges they're looking for, the particular categories they're looking for. So I'll go ahead and paste that in there, press enter, and submit. I've got it running on an extra large instance here, so it should take only a few seconds. It's going to come back with a result.
I love that this is built as a native app on Streamlit. I mean, it makes it really easy to get access to, and it's running on the customer's Snowflake account. I mean, that's a really cool part of this demo.
That's a really important piece, right? Affinity is not paying for the compute used to generate these queries. The client is, which gives them control, frankly. They can, if they decide they don't mind waiting, they can use a smaller instance and pay less. So here's the result. I can go ahead and save that as a table. I already did that. I'm going to go back to my dashboard, and here's the result. And if I click on chart, you can see that I've using the Snowsight visualization, I'm able to get a trend line on those brands. And what I'm spotting here quickly is I can see that this light blue line, which is Sonic Drive-In, actually exceeds, in terms of percentage of the category, it actually exceeds the orange and other blue lines, which are the two leaders, Wendy's and Burger King. And that's because this particular retailer is a drive-in, Sonic Drive-In. You can see the date here, March of 2020, and we all know what happened in March and why folks might prefer a drive-in to going into a restaurant.
So this is amazing to see how simple you've made it for folks to get that data, be able to make those insights. I love that you're doing it directly from Snowsight, Snowflake's own UI, being able to visualize that right then and there. That's really powerful.
Yeah, Daniel, I think that's going to be the key to our success here, is bringing the depth and sophistication of the data itself that we offer together with the simplicity and the connectivity and the sharing capabilities that Snowflake offers. That's the key to success.
Yeah. And I love that you were able to even use and show Snowsight, the Snowflake UI, to graph instantly through some simple SQL queries, a real life example.
Exactly. And if you want, I've got some really complicated SQL queries I can run, but I don't know if we have the time. I do want to add that the Snowflake platform allows our partners to join at the row level without actually seeing the row level data. They can join at the row level, which means, for example, if I'm McDonald's, if I'm looking at my competitors, I can restrict this result to just those folks that bought Chicken McNuggets, let's say.
That's cool.
This way I can see where my Chicken McNugget, customers are going versus and that match can be performed at the row level.
That's fantastic. So tell me more about, some of the key Snowflake features that have made a real big impact. You mentioned a couple of them already. Mm-hmm. The native Snowflake ability to share, the separation of compute and storage. Mm-hmm. How has some things like UDFs played a role in the creation of your application?
Yeah, so the native app, which is essentially a package set of code that is published out as a query tool to allow our partners to query, that makes heavy use of UDFs, right? So we've got user-defined functions in there that allow the client to specify, which brands, which time frames, et cetera. The where clause is the one piece we didn't need to parameterize, right? Yeah. Because we were able to use the UDFs to sort of lock in those compliance rules and make sure that individual level data or anything that's not privacy compliant wouldn't leak out.
Cool. Yeah. So over the next 6 to 12 months, what should your customers get most excited about?
Well, we're going to be building flexibility into this. That's really the key the key to this whole thing. As I mentioned before, there's all different kinds of use cases, and every day we wake up, there's new ways to think about querying the data, new ways to segment the population, new ways to look at trends and insights. So it's that flexibility. With this base sort of beta product in place, right? We'll be looking over the next 4 or 5 months to add flexibility. We're going to add, a couple of dozen syndicated templates. We're going to add the ability to join at the attribute level, not just at the ID level. We're going to integrate with some other Snowflake partners who can provide those crosswalks to enable those joins. And we're going to package up native apps at different price points to allow different levels of access for different price points for different industries.
And so, Mike, if people want to learn more about Affinity Solutions, where should they go?
Well, they can go to affinity.solutions. It's one of those weird domains with a weird TLD, right? Affinity.solutions to read about what our company does. And they can always just give us a call. Happy to walk them through it. Again, with so many use cases that are enabled by this asset, we tend to work, at least now, with larger partners. And that's another thing we're hoping Snowflake will do, is give us click access to that long tail of users that we don't have time to necessarily work with day to day.
And Mike, thanks for joining me in the studio today. It's been great learning all about Affinity and how it's powered by Snowflake.
Thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
And folks, if you want to learn how to build your next application on Snowflake, check out developers.snowflake.com. And if you want to see other interviews like this with technical leaders in the space, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. My name is Daniel Myers, and this has been another episode of Powered by Snowflake.